Hello, I'm Major Pritchard. Thank you for watching today's Corn Belt Regional Forecast, brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. We'll look at the last 72 hours of precipitation, and that shows the pattern here that was well advertised, well forecast. This pesky boundary draped from the southern plains into the mid-Mississippi Valley, and that has saturated, again, the same region, the southern plains, into parts of the central and the eastern Corn Belt in the form of repeated rounds of heavy rain and thunderstorms, and even some severe weather, especially from parts of Oklahoma and Kansas into eastern Missouri, but even some severe weather as far northeast as central Illinois, where we had some large hail damaging wind and a couple of isolated tornadoes in parts of Illinois on Tuesday. The last 14 days, precipitation in terms of a percent of normal. Again, very wet from the southern plains into the central and the eastern Corn Belt. But I also want to highlight a region here that's been very dry across parts of Oklahoma, parts of Iowa and Nebraska. I apologize there. I've just been talking about Oklahoma a lot. But Nebraska and Iowa, believe it or not, there are folks there who are asking when they're going to get rain again, because it's been dry for the last couple of weeks. And that's about the only spot you're going to find in the Corn Belt where people are asking for rain. But that story shows up here when we look at corn planting progress compared to the last 5 days of average. This is from the April 29th USDA Crop Progress Report. And we're starting to see a story emerge across parts of the eastern and central Corn Belt here, Illinois to Ohio, where we are well behind average and going to be further behind average after the next report comes out, I would imagine, because it's just been very wet across parts of Illinois and Indiana especially, but then going to be wet across Ohio as we get into the early part of the weekend. So no progress really being made there, except perhaps in isolated areas where perhaps folks are just willing things to be. But across Nebraska and Iowa, maybe even creeping closer to average by the time this next report comes out, because I would imagine in some of these areas where it has been dry the last couple of weeks, a lot of progress being made, especially with the forecast showing perhaps a return of rain to the area as we get into next week, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. Just a quick snapshot look at here, precipitation through the weekend. This gets us to 1 o'clock in the morning on Monday. And there you see it. We'll see one last storm system, one last one for the next few days, tracking off to the south from the southern plains into the Ohio River. That's going to bring some rain to parts of Missouri, southern Illinois, southern Indiana, along the Ohio River Valley Friday night into Saturday. We'll also see a weak front track through the region, bringing some spotty showers, maybe a light snow flurry to parts of the northern plains and the upper Midwest. Otherwise, for the weekend, staying dry across parts of Nebraska and Iowa, and beginning to dry out across parts of northern Illinois into northern Missouri and northeastern Kansas. It doesn't last forever, but hopefully drying out enough that maybe we can make a little bit of progress here as we dry out into the early part of next week. We look at the next 10 days, though, so all the way through May 12th, and there you go. Dry no more across this region, although not quite as bad as it will be across parts of the southern plains into the mid-south, where we're talking about 4 to 6 inches plus of rain over the next 10 days in this region. So if we're making progress in Nebraska and Iowa, I hope that it does continue, because we will introduce the chance for some rain here as we head into next week, as we resume another active pattern. Looking ahead at the week 2 precipitation anomalies from the GFS, so this is talking about May 10th through May 17th, and the same region stays active from the southern plains into parts of the central Corn Belt, perhaps a bit drier in the eastern Corn Belt and parts of the northern Corn Belt, but so perhaps making some progress in those areas, but just not shutting down this pattern as long as we keep high pressure off to the southeast, and that's going to keep the Gulf of Mexico wide open. So while we will see temporary dry periods where a front pushes through, dries us out for a couple of days, until we see a major pattern shift, which neither Eric Snodgrass or myself are seeing, we're just going to keep the door open for these storm systems and an active weather pattern across the central United States. Looking at the temperature anomalies for the next 5 days, we keep cooler temperatures off to the north, coldest across the northern plains and the upper Midwest, near average to slightly above average across much of the Corn Belt. But if we look at the 5 to 10 day temperature anomalies, we're allowing that cooler air to sink a little bit further south, while we keep high pressure over the southeast, keeping warm, humid air pumping up from the Gulf of Mexico. And there it is again, the dividing line between that warm, humid air mass and the cooler, dry air mass off to the north. That is our battleground. That is where the stage is set for active weather, the development of storm systems, and the development of rain and thunderstorms over an area that we just have had quite enough of that. But the pattern is what it is. We're just the messengers here. We want to keep you informed that we still don't see a major shift coming over the next 10 days. Current temperatures now on Friday morning. The current boundary, we can see that kind of draped across the region. We will see that one last storm system track along this current boundary Friday night into Saturday, bringing rain to parts of this area, but cooling off and drying down over much of the northern and the central Corn Belt as we get in at least to the weekend. Now we'll play out the European model 500 millibar height anomalies, and that's going to kind of show the pattern here as we head into next week. First, we're dealing with this upper level low across parts of Canada, and that's allowing that cooler air to sink into the northern plains in the upper Midwest. We're also going to see a bit of upper level energy swing through there, and that's going to drag a front through the region, allowing that light precipitation to fall across parts of the northern plains in the upper Midwest. We're also now watching this bowling ball tracking in from the Pacific Ocean through the early part of next week. That's going to slide through the southwest United States, and then we'll resume this pattern, which I can draw in here, where we've got a trough in the west, a ridge in the east. Here it is as that gets into now Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday. There we go. And that again resumes a pattern where we've got high pressure over the southeast, ushering in warm and humid air from the Gulf of Mexico. We've got cooler air coming in from Canada, and the dividing line between those air masses right along with the jet stream. That's with that trough in the west. We develop low pressure over the central plains. That lifts northeast, and that is what keeps us active again over the middle part of the country. We'll take another look at that, looking at vorticity on the left and then precipitation type on the right. This is from the European model again. We'll see this upper level energy drag a front through the northern plains before we watch this big upper level low slide through the southwestern United States before kicking out into the central United States by the time we get to mid next week. So let's go through time with this. I'm going to go ahead and bring things back to Friday. Take my drawings off of here. We'll get into Saturday. Now we're seeing this front, this more well-defined low across parts of southern Canada that is going to be dragging that front through the northern plains as we get into Saturday. And now Sunday, you're also seeing this low across the mid-south, creating precipitation across the Ohio River Valley. That lingers into Saturday afternoon across parts of Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Getting into Sunday morning now, still seeing the chance for some light precipitation across the northern plains in the upper Midwest. Before this trough begins to emerge from the southwest, and by the time we get to Tuesday, that's when we're starting to see the chance for showers and thunderstorms resuming across parts of the central Corn Belt. It's where we start to end the dry period across Nebraska and Iowa, so hopefully making progress again through the weekend, because by the time we get to Tuesday and Wednesday, it does turn stormy across Nebraska and Iowa again. And then especially as we get into Wednesday now, this is when we really see this trough emerging over the central United States. We really see the development of low pressure at the surface and the resumption of this boundary kind of draped across this area where we may see repeated rounds of showers and thunderstorms tracking along it, which we will, of course, time out once we get a little bit closer here. Eric will have an update on Monday, the 1 to 2 week outlook. I'll have another Corn Belt forecast on Tuesday morning where we can kind of time out the precipitation here. But right now, I just want to paint the picture where we get this rain out of the way Friday and Saturday. We do have a couple days of dry weather Sunday and Monday, part of Tuesday in some areas, but by the time we get to Wednesday, really looking like we resume this active pattern across the Corn Belt. A closer high-resolution look here, the high-resolution NAM model, just getting us through the weekend, and we'll go ahead and play this out through time. Let me go ahead and jump back here to Friday. Friday, seeing the remnants of the heavy rain that we saw across parts of this region here, kicking off to the northeast, along with that front. We'll go ahead and get us into now, we're into Friday afternoon, getting into Friday night, and this is where we're seeing the organization of this last little low across parts of the Mid-South, the Ohio River Valley. Maybe waking up on Saturday morning to some rain across parts of central and southern Illinois, but this gets out of the way by the time we get to midday on Saturday for you. This becomes, we're into Saturday afternoon now, seeing that rain move out of Illinois, seeing rain showers falling across southern Indiana, much of Ohio, spotty showers across Kentucky and Tennessee for your Saturday evening and Saturday night. By the time we get into Sunday now, really drying out across much of the Corn Belt. Still seeing that front across the northern plains, bringing chances for light showers, maybe some light snow flurries across the northern plains in the upper Midwest. But as we start next week, really looking great across a big chunk of the Corn Belt. So hopefully, again, continuing to make planting progress across Nebraska and Iowa, hopefully getting maybe a couple days of work in here across parts of Illinois if we can just, will it to happen before we turn back to an active pattern. We're looking at precipitable water here, so a way of looking at the moisture content in the atmosphere. As we start things out on Friday evening, or Friday morning, we can see the humid, moisture-laden air mass along and south of that line, drier across the northern plains in the upper Midwest. As I play this loop, we're going to see dry air come in from the north, and that's going to kick this humid air mass off to the south, but it's temporary because we keep high pressure over the southeast, and that's going to allow warm, humid air to once again begin filtering into the area. So let's go ahead and play this out. We again watch this. I'm going to wait for it to restart. Here, let's go ahead and just click through time. As we get through the first part of the weekend, here we're seeing that front kick the humid air mass off to the southeast. But before we even get to Monday afternoon, you're already seeing the return flow from the southeast, from the Gulf of Mexico, returning that humid air mass to the central United States. And so again, as long as this is the case, until we see a major pattern shift where we get rid of this high over the southeast, the resumption of a trough over the west, with the ridge over the east, until we see a major shift away from this pattern, the background state is just set for the repeated development of storm systems across the central United States, and that means active, rainy, and wet. While we might get a few days of dry weather, the overall pattern remains active and stormy. We'll take a look at the precipitation type, or the precipitation forecast from the National Blended Model, just showing you again as we get through Monday afternoon, still dry across this region. This is precipitation that we saw Friday and Saturday across the Mid-South and parts of the Eastern Corn Belt. But then as we play this out now, getting in through Monday through the rest of the week, it does turn stormy across at least parts of Iowa, southern Wisconsin, and Illinois getting into the Eastern Corn Belt. Perhaps parts of Nebraska staying a bit drier. You're kind of on the western edge there. So still perhaps making some progress. If anyone's going to be dry over the next 10 days, or at least dry-ish, it's going to be the northern plains here, North Dakota, South Dakota, parts of maybe northern Minnesota, but it's cool there. That's where we're going to be dealing with cooler temperatures. So drier, but a cool dry across the northern plains. We'll finally finish up here, I should say, looking at the next week of precipitation from the European model. This is just straight from the operational run, and it matches well with the GFS. I wanted to compare these to you and just show you that the same story is being told with, again, that active pattern setting up with things being quite active across almost the entire Corn Belt. Again, maybe the northern plains and the upper Midwest staying a little bit drier, but a cool dry. But if we look at the GFS again, same story with the same regions remaining very active with another week of dealing with 2 to 3 inches of precipitation across a widespread area. Perhaps talking about severe weather, especially from the southern plains into the central plains, parts of the Midwest. I think this could be a region we're talking about severe thunderstorms by the time we get to mid to late next week. But again, I feel like I may be sounding like a broken record at this point. I just wanted to point out we're going to see a few days of dry weather across a lot of the Corn Belt here, especially Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. But by the time we get to Wednesday of next week, really looking like we'll shift back to another similar pattern with storm systems tracking across the central U.S. and across the Corn Belt, bringing the chance for rain, heavy rain, thunderstorms, and perhaps some severe weather in parts of the Corn Belt. We'll finish looking at high temperatures here for the next 5 days. Our Friday high temps quite cool across a big chunk of the Corn Belt here, where we're seeing that cooler air mass sink in from the north. Warming back up as we get into the weekend here. Saturday high temperature is in the 70s all the way up to South Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. As we get into next week, you're going to start to see the beginning stages of this cooler air sinking off to the south with the warm, humid air mass coming in from the south. Here are our Sunday high temperatures, Monday high temperatures, and then Tuesday seeing perhaps the first 80s of the year moving into parts of central Illinois and central Indiana with that cooler air mass coming in from the north, warm and humid from the south. You can almost draw this in here. Then the development of low pressure across the central plains, tracking slowly through the central and eastern Corn Belt, and that's where, again, we remain very active and stormy across a big chunk of the Corn Belt. Finishing here, looking at Wednesday high temperatures, really again seeing that boundary begin to set up, and the dividing line between that is where we'll expect to be very active with rain and thunderstorms getting into mid to late next week. As always, Eric Snodgrass will have an in-depth look at the next 1 to 2 weeks in our Monday Morning Ag Forecast video, and I'll have your next Corn Belt Regional Forecast for you right here midday on Tuesday. Have a great weekend.